Action. All right. Hello, everyone. I am here with Joe Jackman, and today we're just going to be talking about how Joe had a very successful weight loss recently, and we thought it would be a nice idea just to share this story because there's a lot of people out here that are, struggling with weight, and are wanting to shed the pounds. So. Joe, if you could give us a brief introduction to who you are, where you're at, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, so my name is Joe Jackman. I live here in Southwest Minnesota. Town is called Tyler, Minnesota. It's about a town of 1,000 people. You see nothing but cornfields usually, everywhere you go. Um, so yeah, I'm out here. I've been out here now for probably around the last like 15, 16 years. And I used to be from California. And I used to weigh about 220 pounds, and now I'm
Right.
down to about 143. So I
Yeah,
dropped pretty
so
drastically.
let's dive into that. So, you weighed how much? 200,
220 is what
220,
my biggest weight was.
220, and now you are what?
143.
143. So that's like 57, like what, 60, 70 pounds?
Yeah, roughly. I'll say if you do the math, 220 minus. Sorry, I'm not good at basic math, unfortunately. 77 pounds. Yep.
70 what?
77.
77 pounds. Okay, wow. So this is what we're wanting to make this video about. You lost 77 pounds, and to my understanding, it was quite effortless, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, let's just dive right into it. Like, I think there's a lot of people out here that struggle with, losing weight, shedding the pounds. So please, yeah, tell us your story about this whole thing.
Yeah, so it all really started when I was introduced to the group Self-Effective. And when I got introduced to the group, you know, um, Mitch, actually, I live 3 hours away from him. He drove down here to this town, came and sat down with me at a coffee shop. And we talked for like 3 hours. But to be honest with you, it was nothing about like self-effective. We literally were just talking, just to get to know each other. And yeah, so we were sitting there talking, and he was telling me about this event. He's like, Joe, he's like, honestly, like you got to get to San Diego. That's where the self-affected San Diego event, first one was for me that I was introduced to. And he was like, you got to get there. He's like, I think it'd be really good for you. And at the time, I was really like holding on to a lot of stuff, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be able to make that work. My wife's a stay-at-home mom. We have a 4-year-old son. Like I just don't see it in my cards, right? And my wife later then was like, no, like we have to go. Like one of us has to go. Either you or me. We have to figure it out. And I was like, well, let me think about it. Like I'll see what I can do and see what gets worked out. I ended up making it happen. I bought a plane ticket from an app called Afterpay. I made payments on it. I'll say I ended up sharing a room with a dude that I don't even remember his name. And I went there probably with only about a couple $100 in my pocket, just for food. Ideally, was really what it was for. Um, and yeah, so I went out there and I met you, I met everybody, and it was crazy because I'm usually a really sociable person. Like my mom used to tell me all the time, like you put me in a room with 100 people, give me an hour, I'll make friends with them all. Well, I was put in a whole resort with 150 people, and every time I was talking to somebody, I'd run away and call my wife, like, "Hey, I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm lost." And throughout the event, I started getting better and better with talking to people and getting to know them. But it was still just kind of like it was weird for me because that's not who I am to not talk to people. And so the event goes on, and I ended up getting up on stage there. I seen the value of everybody there. Everybody there had just amazing energy and was willing to support and help and be like, Joe, like, you got to come meet this person. You got to come meet this person. I remembered I was sitting at a table, and Mitch was like, I was sitting at a table alone, and Mitch was like, no, that's not going to happen. He went and brought me over to the rest of the people from Minnesota. I made friends with them. Later that I know that how much friends I would be with them out here. So that was really cool. Um, but then proceeding to everything, at the event was really life changing. I stopped smoking weed. at the event. It was something very huge for me. I mean, I grew up, that was my lifestyle, smoking weed all the time. I'm an ex drug addict with everything, but weed was really like my main drug. Like, my family does it, my aunts, uncles, grandparents, I mean, it's what it was. I think my grandma was really the only one that never smoked the way that the rest of the family did. And so when I got there, just being around that energy and not having no drugs, no alcohol, really made me like open up my eyes. Like, wow, like people can live like this, because I was never taught that that's how someone can live. So that was really crazy to me. So then, yeah, I was out there and people weren't drinking, and I got off the plane right away. And my first thought was like, oh, I gotta go find a smoke shop and go get high, and then I started getting paranoid, and I was like, oh, I can't get high. They're gonna know I'm high, and it was a whole downward spiral with everything. So I ended up not smoking, and that was the beginning of my journey. I stopped smoking weed, and I came back home, and it was funny because I told my wife, like, I'm done smoking. Like, it's not gonna happen. Like, I don't need it. Like, they helped me because Austin and everybody there, like Austin Hale, you, John Salario, a lot of people there helped me recognize a lot of like why I was smoking and like what I was trying to suppress. And little did I know, though, that was only part of what I needed to do to continue my journey. And so it was like the first step. And I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, I came back home, told Kayla, like, hey, I'm done. Like, I want something better for us. Like, and the way I need to do that is by stopping here, starting not smoking. And at the time, I didn't have Techno Tutor. I was only introduced to the group. And even still, when I got back, I didn't have everything I needed to get it yet. So I placed in line everything I needed to do. I talked with Mitch, came up with the game plan, and I think it was the following month. I ended up getting Techno Tutor, and then the next month I ended up becoming an LB, because I see the value of how much it helped me. Because when I started doing Techno Tutor, I started realizing that there was a lot that I was suppressing, to a point where it was physically hanging on to. Hence why I was 220 pounds, because a lot of this stuff I didn't want to bring up. My wife barely knew about it. My mother barely knew about it. There was only certain people around me that knew the things that I did and the things that I had to do at the time of growing up the way that I did, being gang affiliated and everything like that. So it was a really crazy situation, but it was the next step. So then I started doing techno computer, and at first I was like, I don't know about this. This seems kind of crazy, like, does this really work? And I had to change my mindset. That was one thing I had a conversation with. Like, I'm doing it, but as I was doing it, I used it for my job mainly at first, and I went from making 4 grand to making 8 grand. I went from making 8 grand then to making 12 grand a month. And so this was a huge process where I was like, wow, this actually works. Like, holy crap, they weren't lying to me, They weren't just trying to grab my money and go. So then I was like, okay, like, well, everybody else is talking about how you can work through your past on this. And I was like, I don't know, man. I got some pretty messed up stuff. Like, I don't know if it can really work for me, And I started diving into it, and I started going into my past. At first, I started doing it only like once a day in the morning before I went to work, doing my regular stuff that I did for my job, and then going more personal about it into everything with me about like my past. And at the time, I really only started to do it um, very like shallow. I wasn't diving deep into the stuff that I
Yeah.
need. But as I started to do it, I started to notice that like I was feeling better, my mind was feeling more clear, and my body started to feel better. And this was something huge for me because I was like, well, like in my family, I was always told, if you're not fat, you're not part of the family. I got a brother who's 6'7", weighing at like 350 pounds. My uncles were all big people. My one uncle who got shot and killed was 5'8", weighing like 300 pounds. I got another uncle who is like 6'5", weighing at like 350. And so like that was a huge thing. But so I started diving deeper into this, and I had this deep programming that no, I needed to be fat in order to be accepted by my family. So it was
Wow.
very huge on me because it was like my family, I was taught being Mexican, especially like your family is everything. Like You do everything for your family. You take care of your family. You do everything you need to do for your family. So little did I know I had all this stuff deep in me. Not only was it deep in me, it was something that I thought that that was only who I could be. That was the only person that I was allowed to be because I wasn't ever taught. And once I started diving further into like destiny and actually going into this stuff, I started realizing more and more and more that my programming of who I am is not actually who I am. And I even went through a point in time where I went through like panic mode and I was telling Kayla, like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, who am I? I'm just a product of my parents, and this is just crazy. Like, I don't even know, like, and I started to get like really, really nuts about it because I was a huge conspiracy theorist growing up. Um, so that was where I was like, I started diving into this, and a lot of it started to prove like a lot of this stuff was accurate on the conspiracy theories, but they weren't theories. There was actual facts behind certain plays that were being made, and some of the theories were kind of far fetched, but there was bases on this stuff that I found in Destiny. And once again, I started diving deeper because when I then started to realize I had this crazy programming that I am just this gangbanger and I am just this crazy conspiracy theorist person. I'm only an addict. I'm only this. I'm only that. I put myself in a category. And that honestly, I think, was such a huge effect because I started going into this past and realizing some of the things that I did from being in gang relations or being how my family programmed me a certain way. Or I even pinpointed my weight situation to my uncle. My uncle told me when I was younger that I wasn't fat enough to be his nephew and that I would never be fat enough to be his nephew because it's just, that's what he told me. And little did I know how much charge this had on me. So it was like I was eating very unhealthily. I was eating everything that I could, and don't get me wrong, it's not like doing this weight loss situation. Like I didn't cut my eating. I didn't cut my I can only eat this much, or I can only do this, or I have to work out 30 minutes a day. I didn't do any of that. It was simply diving into my process.
Mm.
So I went from using TechnoTutor to 1 time a day, to then 2 times a day, to then 3 times a day, to then anytime I had an opportunity, I was on my computer going through my TechnoTutor and my past reading Destiny and going in this. And it really started to make a change. And so that led up, that was in like from, what was it, June to August, I think is what it was. And by the time August hit, I got my distributorship and things really started to kind of fast pace for me. I started being like, okay, if I'm gonna be a distributor, I gotta go dive even further. Like I gotta go even deeper into this. And so I started going further. And by this time, I maybe lost like 10, 15 pounds at the most at that time.
Mm.
But what really hit was then I was like, hey, I heard about the distributor event in Texas. And I was like, okay, well, I gotta, I gotta make it out there. Like I have to, like, I gotta figure it out. I don't know yet how I'm gonna do it, but I trust myself that I'm going to do it. And so that was where then I took myself further into that and actually was like, okay, I'm diving deeper, I'm going further, and I really just once again, I'm doing this tech tutor, anytime that I got an opportunity, to the point where like even at work, like if somebody made me mad at work, I was like, hey, I gotta figure out why am I getting so triggered by this person, or why am I getting so triggered by my boss, and I would literally take my notebook out, I would do a spider web, and I'd figure out the points of where it was, and I'd start my self forgiveness. I'd go into that, and then I literally look at all the definitions that I had, find out any key words that were in that definition that was like, oh, this is sticking out to me, this is sticking out to me. And then I would take those words, find the definitions on those words, and go even further into that and find out, oh, well, this definition means this definition means this. Then I'd look at those words and I'd find any other words that stuck out to me until I couldn't find no more words that stuck out to me doing this, right? Once I did that, then I would then do my self-forgiveness. And I'd write myself forgiveness over until I can finally came to that point where, like, okay, I can't do it no more. And then I take this stuff and I put it through my techno tutor. I'll take this words and everything that triggered me that was like, oh, like I had to write a definition on this, write a definition on this, write a definition on this. And I'd put it all through my techno tutor and any emotions or anything that I had with it. So then I'm doing that literally like every opportunity I got that I had a reaction to certain emotions or certain feelings or certain situations, I then was taking it to that next step.
Mm.
And then as I'm doing this a lot more, I then started to, I, I thought I was sick for a while. So I was like, I'm losing weight pretty quickly. Like, this just, it doesn't seem right, and diabetes runs big in my family.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, well, I got to figure this out. I got to go into this. Little did I know, your pancreas actually swells up anytime that you're stressed. And at my job, I was literally getting stressed out over anything. And I was having this emotion to not being able to close this sale or not being able to do this, or a customer talked to me wrong and gave me a bad survey and I lost $1,000, 2 grand on a paycheck. And I was worrying about all the stuff that I couldn't control, the same way that I was worrying about my past on everything that I couldn't let go. So I really had to learn how to not only let go of my past, but I had to learn to let go of the stress and not allow things to stress me out. Because then if I did, I started having vision problems and everything because my pancreas would swell and I wouldn't be getting enough insulin in my body, which then would put me into this diabetic state. I then later learned all this and was able then to pinpoint all the stress where it was coming from. And I had to, once again, let everything go. Once I did that, I stopped having problems. I stopped having problems with my like sugars and stuff like that. And still to this day, I haven't had any problems with my pancreas or anything like that, because I was able to find the root of it and go forward from that. So then I'm losing weight, and I'd say by the time I hit Texas, I was probably about 190, 185 pounds.
Mm.
And being at Texas really showed me a lot more value. Because, yeah, I went to San Diego, and that was cool, but I didn't have a technical tutor or the tools to help. So then I went to Texas, and I had it at this time, and I was able to bring my wife and son down there. And I was able to see all the families, you and your wife and your daughter, and everybody else that was there. And it was a whole situation where, to me, then showed me a bigger picture, which then pushed me to another point. I was like, okay, I see this. I see what it can be. I see what I can do. Now, what am I going to do about it? And where am I going to take part in this in my life? So we go to Texas, great time, had a wonderful time. We drove down there, we drove back. We get back home, and I started then pinpointing people in my life. I was like, okay, who are people in my life that cause me too much stress? And how much purpose am I putting into these people? A good one was I grew up a mama's boy, very big mama's boy. I would die for my mother left and right at the time. Like, I had this thing with my family that there was a code word that anytime anyone in my family needed me, they just needed to message me this code word or call me. I didn't care if I was at work. I didn't care if I was at the gas station. I didn't care if I was with my wife and son. It was one of those things. It was like, if they tell me this, I had to drop everything I was doing and go to them to help them. So then I started realizing I was putting more, what's the right word for it? I was putting more value into the old life that I thought I let go,
Mm.
and I wasn't putting value into the life that I was building. And that
Mm.
was huge because at that point, then once we came back to Texas, I started to realize these points. And I was like, wow, all the stuff that I thought I let go, I didn't let go. It was just, I didn't dive deep enough to understand why these things were still attached to me. So then once again, I started going further and further and further into my process and actually understanding, okay, well, my mom had such a strong hold on me because I was paying bills at 10 years old. I was helping her with everything that I could at that time. I had my first real job at 9 years old, working construction with my father. And during all this time was very huge because I didn't get a chance to be a kid. And I used to put this on my parents all the time. And still, I can't lie that I still today am working on that exact point because there is still some stuff that I'm working on. Obviously I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But we just strive to be the best version of ourselves. And every day that's what I'm striving for.
Yep.
So it's like I then realized, oh, okay, well, my mom has this big hold on me. My family has this big hold on me. And I had to learn to let it go. And I had a great talk with Katie. Katie actually called me out, and Katie Cope, and she actually called me out and called me feminine. She's like, Joe, you're very feminine. And at that time, like I really wanted to react. I was like, what do you mean I'm feminine? Like what? Like, nah, you don't know the stuff I went through. I'm a man. I've been the man of the house. Like that was like literally what went through my head. And Katie was like, Joe, I don't mean it like in a bad way, but you were raised by a woman. So you have a very feminine touch to you because you didn't have a male role model in your life. So then I was like, damn, yeah, because my dad really wasn't around. He was, if he was around, he was drunk. And then he passed out or he was too busy to ever do anything. So that was something too, where it was like, okay, new point has opened up in my past that I still haven't let go. So then I had to dive into that. I was like, okay, well, why am I such this feminine version? Like, where did it really stem from? I know it stemmed from my mom, but why did it stem from my mom? And why was it that I had such this view that I couldn't have a positive role model in my life because my dad was this alcoholic and he didn't care, and my mom did the best she could with me. She taught me everything I could, such as being a respectable person, respectable human, having manners, everything, the basics of what a good human being should be, or just a human. It doesn't gotta be. I hate defining good and bad, for especially the way that I grew up. It's like I don't agree with that. But it was literally this whole situation of, okay, I have all this stuff that I'm good at, but why was I not being a man? Why was I not being masculine? And a point that I realized was no woman can raise a man for the world that we are living in, let alone for the world that we grew up. And they can do the best they can, and they can help them and provide them and make them into respectable young human beings. But to be a man, you've really got to have that male influence on you, someone that can teach you the masculinity of who you really are as being a man. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, because I grew up, uncles telling me like, to be a man, you got to do this. To be a man, you got to do that. It doesn't necessarily rely on that, but showing them and playing an example of being able to walk process, have a structured environment around you, and be able to have these building blocks to develop an actual, for one, business or develop themselves. Because running a business is the same way as you developing yourself.
Yeah.
If you don't put effort into your business is never going to be anything. If you don't put effort into yourself, you're never going to be anything. You're not going to be that version you want to be. So it's like I took this understanding and then once again did process, went into destiny, found relations to situations of where I was understanding on the masculinity and femininity. And I had this huge thing about sex. I was very, very I was not a good young man growing up, or when it came to that. I grew up watching my uncles hit women. I grew up watching my uncles pimp women. It was the environment that I grew up in. Little did I know how much holding on to such a thought of just sexual intercourse could really put weight on you, because it's like you're constantly thinking, am I enough? Am I enough for her? Am I doing enough for her? Am I doing enough for myself? Is she doing enough for me? There's this constant judgment part that you don't realize is attached. And once again, all this stuff, everything that you hold on to, a lot of it, your past and everything, if you physically have this resentment towards it or don't realize like who you are, it literally sticks to you. It sticks to you. It's fact. It literally sticks
Right.
to you as fact. And so like I really had to learn that it was like there was this a lot more to me than just this drug addict, this whore of a man, because I used to tell myself that all the time before I met Kayla. Oh, I was with this woman, I was with all these women, and I was just this big player, and everybody loved me, and everything like that because of the image. And once again, I was able to pinpoint it back to my one uncle who passed away. He was a big player. He had a different woman in his bedroom every single night in my grandmother's house. Every night, it was never the same person. I used to stay there for summers on end, and every single night that I'd stay there, I never seen the same person. Actually, I only seen one person that was the same woman, and she later ended up following down the line to getting killed, pretty much. But that was like, and once again, that was what my uncle lied on, that it was like, you can't trust women. So then here I am going into these relationships, not trusting any woman ever, ever. And like I would put weed over my relationship every time. I used to tell women all the time, don't ever make me choose between you and marijuana because you're not gonna like the answer. And I used to even tell Kayla that at the beginning of our relationship. You know, me and Kayla have been together for 8 years, and we've only been walking this process for going on a year now. And that's something crazy to me because it's like Kayla's been through a lot with me. She's stuck through a lot of things with me, through thick and thin. You know, and it really goes into that understanding that women have this vision for us men a lot more than what we can see. And
Yeah.
as men, we can create opportunities for us, no problem. But the woman sees the value of you as a man and is able to shape you into the man that they know you can be, that you want to be, but maybe clouded by misjudgment, by past relationships, or even by your family. So it's like Caleb stuck through me with a lot. And as I'm going through this process, and this is from like November, then now leading up to this last event in Miami, which was awesome. It taught me a whole new level of standard of what I want for myself or what I want for my family and really what my goals are. And that goes into further with my weight loss, right? So through that time, I'm doing process and I started then eating more organic. That was really the only thing I changed about my like diet was we started eating organic fruit, organic meat. Kayla started making homemade bread, everything that she can make homemade. She makes homemade syrup, homemade anything she can that she can make homemade. She makes it from scratch and does it. And that was very huge for me too, because it's like it takes out preservatives, it takes out all these additives that the
Yep.
US allow to be put in our food. So once again, those are really the only things that changed. Other than that, like I wasn't working out, like I wasn't like I maybe do, you know, push-ups in the morning, but I was never consistent about it. Now since I came back from Miami, I've been a lot more consistent about it just because I've seen now my body is my temple. And now that I'm at the weight that I never thought I could be at, because I used to always want to be this skinny guy because in school I was always this big kid, and growing up gang related things like that, being a drug addict, kids were always afraid of me. I'd get in fights. I grew up fighting my whole life, both physically and emotionally and even mentally. And digging into my process learned for me to let these things go, and physically learning to then now understanding that my body is my temple. And it's one thing to be, you know, at the weight that I'm at, but now it's pushing myself to the next level and being the best version that my body can be. And don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm in the weight room 24 hours a day. Like I gotta hit the, you know, weights and stuff like that. I'm not like that, but I do push-ups, sit-ups, you know, pull-ups in the morning, things I call it the prison workout because
Yeah,
I've only
yeah.
ever known jailbirds to do these kind of things. So but that's what I've been doing. And now like I'm starting to see more physical depth, which is something that once again I've always wanted for myself. But really the ultimate key of me that was losing weight was physically diving deep into my process, not just doing it one time a day, not just looking at myself in a certain way, physically getting into it emotionally to where like I was crying sometimes in my process, especially like it would be rough for me because it'd be early in the morning. Kayla and Milo would be asleep, and I'm sitting here doing my process, and I'd hit some emotions, and I'd cry, and that was even a physical part for me too, because like I was always taught like you can't cry, you're a man, like men don't cry, like if you cry as a man, like you're not a man. So like that was another situation where it was like, okay, I did process on that. And one thing I learned though is like your body physically has to let go of things in many different ways, whether that is like, you know, sweating or even crying. There's many different ways that it has to let go. And it's one thing to do your process and be like, okay, I go deep, you know, like I remember this thing, I was raped as a kid or whatever it was, right? Um, and then be like, okay, I do my writing, okay, good to go. Bada bing, bada boom. I did my process for the day, I'm good. It's a next level to actually physically get in your head. And like Kayla would even get upset with me because she's like, I'm not seeing you do your process. Like she's like, I don't see you do it. And Milo wasn't seeing me do it. And I had to explain to her because for me, how deep I was diving, I'd get emotional and I'd be so in my head that like if they tried to talk to me, like I would snap on it because it's like I'm diving deep into this process and like I need focus. And I didn't want that to happen because I was changing who I was. And not necessarily changing. I was becoming the person that I never knew that I could be. Because, you know, us being who we are, we're constantly and you know this, so you know we're a version of our ever since the day we were born, we're a
Yep.
product of what our parents made us to be. Our thoughts are not our actual thoughts. The things we like aren't actually what we like because it was what your dad liked and what your mom liked. And yeah, you had a little bit of personality. Maybe you liked the, you know, for me, like it was a different football team that I liked than my dad. But then there was still that structure that my dad beat into me of, hey, you have to like football, you know, and still to this day, I'm a huge football fan no matter what. But I've also understood that it's based on entertainment to keep us distracted. So then it's like you look at it in a different way and then having to realize that reality is a crazy picture that we live in. And as I'm diving deep into these thoughts, I would start to get emotional and it would physically take over my body to where like I'd be angry, I'd be aggravated, I'd cry. I had to go through these emotions to actually understand these emotions that were happening to me before when I was younger, and I would just suppress them. It was like I had to relive everything that I went through to let these emotions go so that I was able to understand what those emotions meant to be able to move forward. So it's like I get this all the time, you know, like I said, you know, people ask me like, especially once we hit Miami, like, Joe, you just look so different. Like, and it's crazy because like I've looked at pictures for myself from before, or even at San Diego, and you could see to my face, I was really like, I was chubby, you know, I had these chubby cheeks, like
Yeah.
that's what I was. And it's like now, even looking at myself here in the camera, it's like I have this more thinner out face structure,
Yeah.
which is crazy because it's like I always wanted that, but I was, you know, I was too fat. Or like, you know, I would always be like, I can't like go like this, or I couldn't wear too tight of shirts. And I, just this last weekend, we went to the cities, and you know, we spent a lot of money on new clothes for me. I went down from wearing shirts that were larges to now I'm wearing a medium or pants. I went from a 36-30 in pants to a 30-30. I dropped down 6 sizes in my waist since I'd say San Diego was really where it started to happen because I started to realize, and I was literally drowning in my clothes. But like I tell everybody, you know, like I'm talking with this young lady, and I'm not gonna say her name and stuff just because we're still talking about things, and obviously I don't have permission from her to say that. But we're talking, and I'm kind of guiding her through understanding of what I did. And like I told her, you know, a lot of this comes down to your process. A lot of people, they want to lose weight, or maybe they've been trying, but how deep are you really going? Is it physically affecting you emotionally? Are you physically having these mental thoughts that are like, holy crap, I literally had to relive this whole situation play by play.
Hmm.
And I have to physically let this go to the point like I got to get emotional about it because I have to physically let it release. Whether it's like you're angry and you had a situation that maybe when you were 7 years old, your dad didn't let you get a toy that you wanted in the store. Okay. But then your dad then told you like, well, why are you upset? Why are you crying about it? You don't need that. You don't need to cry. I'll give you a reason to cry about it. Like it's one thing to recognize that and be like, wow, you know, I remember that, you know, like that was such a crazy time. And then doing your process on it, maybe writing down certain little things. But then do you relive it? Do you physically go into it and be like, wow, you know, that really made me like, I was so mad. I was so angry. Does it get your blood going? Does it get you angry? Does it make it to where you have to go and do something physical because you physically have to release it? Or, you know, I know a lot of young women who have been sexually abused, you know, and that is huge because that plays such a huge connection to you. And it's hard to relive those moments. But have you been able to relive that moment so that you can move forward? And it may take you reliving that moment 1, 2, 3, 4 times. There were certain situations that I went through from people that I seen get shot and killed from the emotion that I had that I physically had to relive it a couple times because of the actions that I played in a part of it. Not saying I killed anybody. That's not me. I'm not. No. Um, but it was in that sense that I had to relive that multiple times. The first time was getting a grasp on it. Okay, this actually happened. This was something that physically happened. I was there. I witnessed it. Okay. Then diving a step further, reliving it a second time, understanding, okay, now you understand that you were there, but do you remember the emotion that you had when it happened? And then once you're able to recognize, oh, I was scared for my life because I didn't know what was going to happen next. Then taking it to relive it a third time. I'm able to understand that I was physically there. I'm able to understand that I physically had an emotional reaction that I suppressed. And then taking it to the next step and being like, I need to relive that emotional experience that I had so that then I can physically release it. Whether it was like, wow, I was scared. And then understanding that your body has a certain way it reacts when you get scared. And that was a huge thing too, as I was learning through Destiny and everything. I learned that these emotions, your body has a certain reaction, the way your blood gets, to the temperature it gets, the way your blood cells react to it, literally to the way that your anatomy of your body has these certain physical reactions. And then you have to tap into those physical reactions and relive that reaction in order for you to let it go. And that was what I was doing. That's why I was doing it so much, because I had to go through every single process, every single situation, every single thing that I was able to pinpoint. And I had to relive it multiple times to physically let it go. And so that was really huge. And why I started to, after I was doing this and actually understanding that there was this process that I had to follow in order to release this stuff, I physically started to see it drop. My weight was dropping critically, because then it led up to now, Miami. I went from, like that 190, 180 pounds in Texas to 143. That's pretty much a 40 to 50 pound difference in the span of what it was: November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. I mean, in the span of 6 months, 7 months, like that's crazy. It's like when you see those commercials, they're like, so and so lost 60 pounds in 6 months, and you can do it too if you only put $40 a month in and this and da 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 da. Like it really felt like that, because as I was there in Miami, like it was crazy to me. People were coming up to me, Joe, you look so different. Joe, you look so different. And I didn't really like see it until like really Miami, where people were telling me. Like my mom would tell me, like, like you're losing weight, mijo. Like, are you eating? Or, like Kayla would tell me, like, you're losing weight. And like I look in the mirror and be like, wow, I look, I feel different. I feel better. I look a little different, but I didn't really understand the criticalness of how much. Like, and I was standing on the scale and understanding that, oh, I was 100, 220 pounds, and I was 190 pounds, and then I'm down to 145 pounds, and it's like I thought I was sick, but little did I learn, and I had to realize that I'm not sick. I'm in the greatest condition I've ever been at. But we live in a society that tells you that, oh, you know, if you're not overweight or obese, or if you're not, eating these things, then you're sick and there's something wrong with you. So then once again, it has this physical play on you where you start reacting. You're like, God, am I actually sick? Is there actually something wrong with me? Is there something else that I should, like, should I go to the doctor? Like, should I go see? And no matter what, I mean, it's one of those things, but it's like I went to the doctor even, and they told me, like, you're healthy. And being 5'8", your weight's supposed to be anywhere from 145 to 150 pounds. So I'm like literally just a little bit under where I'm supposed to be. And like once again, I'm not changing the way I eat. It was physically my process. So
Yeah.
that's like the whole story of me realizing how doing this process and doing these actual, and like I said, it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm doing my process, but to physically be doing it and living the principles. And don't get me wrong, I'm still learning to live the principles full on. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm this sanctified person, that I'm the greatest ever, and da 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 da. Like, no, like it's something that I'm having to walk through every single day, and I have to understand. And now, me and Kayla, after the event, we both agreed that every week we're going to sit down on Sunday and talk about how we're living the principles. How can we help each other, be in this process and go further into this process and dive into it? And it's like, not only is that healthy for me and her as a relationship, because that's one thing too, 𝚢𝚘𝚗𝚍 𝚸𝚕 saved was my relationship. when I say Kayla was like, this rock for me, she really was.
Yeah.
Um, but there was nights that we used to stay up and argue and yell till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd have to go to work the next day, and I'd end up physically calling in because I didn't get no sleep because we just yelled at each other all night. And it's like once we had tech shooter, and you're able to one identify your emotions, two understand these words that life is nothing but words. A tree wouldn't be called a tree if you didn't know what a tree was. And having this physical process with it, it's like people think that, oh, I can just take it lightly. Oh, I can just do this little by little. But if you physically apply yourself, you can do anything you want,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's wonderful because like, one thing I love that we say at, at these events, that these last two events that I've been to, and I've never been to events. Like I didn't go to Tony Robbins events. I didn't go to these other people. Once I heard of Self-Affected, this was my first group of self-development. Like I always thought that I'm just gonna be this drug addict gangbanger and just die, of like 35 for me fucking up somewhere or something. Like that was my whole mentality. And then once I got introduced, like my whole life changed. It did a complete 360, and it's been nothing but for the best. And it's great because it's like I'm making more money. I see a great change in both me and my wife as a relationship, and as living as agreements is really what it is. And the great thing is like my son then is now seeing the man that my wife is helping me become. And that's the greatest thing ever, because that was the only thing I ever wanted growing up, was that positive role model. And my dad taught me how to work. Don't get me wrong. Like he took me to work, and that was how he related to me. That's how he taught me. But he didn't think he was going to be alive as long as he is. So then that created this doubt in me that I was like, oh, and then people telling me you're going to die by 20, like, if you keep going down the route you're going. And it, once again, just created all this physicality too. So, if you don't think that you can do it, you're wrong. You can do it. But one of the things I love at saying in these events is that we are alive, we are awake, and we are creators. And one thing I always tell people is that, I tell people that, and not only are we creators, but we create every opportunity we ever want in life. So it's like, what opportunity do you want for your life? Where do you want to create the best opportunity for yourself? Is it weight? Okay, cool. You can do it. But you physically have to believe that you can do it. It's one thing to hope that you can do it. I hate hope. I really do. I hate people who are like, I hope I can do this. I hope I can do that. Like, no, hope is a poor man's game. It's that simple. I hope I can make $1 million one day, right? No, screw that. I am going to make $1 million one day, right? I know there's ways that I can do it, and I'm going to do it. I know that I'm going to be great. I know that I can lose weight. I know that I can be a husband. I know that I can be a father. But if you sit there, I hope I could be a good father. I hope I could be a dad. What do you think is going to happen?
Right.
So
Right.
that's what I got for my story.
Awesome. Awesome stuff. Uh, you know, I really admire your ability to speak. It's, I think it's a rare trait that few people have, and you have that. So I love just hearing you speak, and you spoke at the last event on stage, and that was awesome. And I think before people go into the comments or message us about what is process, like just before you go in the comments, just message one of us. And I think that's really the big question, because you're saying process has caused me to lose all this weight and have all this success in my life. But what is that? So if you're curious what it is, message Joe, message myself, and we'll gladly explain to you what exactly that actually means, and how it can benefit yourself, and if you want to lose weight or some other things. Maybe it's more money, but um, yeah, that was great. That was great. I guess
I
any
appreciate you having me on
final,
here.
yeah, yeah, any final words before we end off here?
Um, you know, yeah, once again, just if you guys have a question about, what process is, just message one of us, or even in the situation of like what the group self-affected is, because I know I have people on my Facebook, and I have my own YouTube channel called Joint Perspective too. And it's one of those things where it's like a lot of people are afraid to reach out because it's like, oh, he's talking about process. What's process? Like, you're never gonna know unless you take that step to actually reach out. I don't bite. Owen doesn't bite. No one in the group is like, oh no, you can't know. Like It's simply just you have to take that leap of faith
Hmm.
and trust and know that there's a better outcome out there if you want it. So
Yeah.
that's all that I got.
Yeah, I heard this nice little saying. Well, at least give it a no thank you taste. Like
Yeah.
I tried it and I was like, okay, no, thank you. But maybe you could just do that. Whatever. But yeah, awesome, Joe. Nice to have you on. And to whoever's watching, we appreciate your time. And we know that you got some value out of this.
There we go.
All right. Bye.